Alone time, are you coming tonight? I couldn't bring myself to meet her eyes. Mariana stared at me with a look of eagerness, a look that hurt me to make disappear. She'd asked this question the past month about twice a week, each time a little emptier than the last. I didn't blame her. I hung my head, a head so heavy on my shoulders, and weakly shrugged. With that, she pursed her lips, tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear, and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. Just let me know if you're ready. Molly, the idea of being ready seemed unattainable. Breaking up with Dominic was one of the most painful things I'd ever endured. Never in my life could I imagine the pain that comes with saying goodbye to a long-term partner, and the relationship we tirelessly worked to build together. This entire month was one of complete and utter despair. I was a negative mass of energy that did what it was supposed to do, but saw no point in it. Mariana saw this. She saw my grief. She stayed with me the night we ended things. And the following few nights. I couldn't bear to be alone, even more so in current times, and she knew it. We sat in my dim living room, illuminated only by the street lamp outside, and uttered no words. No television, no music. What I needed was another soul in the room, cradling in it what was left of mine. Those nights were some of the darkest nights I have ever had the displeasure of knowing. The dust stirred in the light peeking through the blinds, giving a thin coat to the surfaces of a room I no longer cared for. This room was now haunted. He had claimed this space by filling it with futile memories. Memories of the nights where we'd laugh over a game of cards and a few too many glasses of Chardonnay, memories of running my fingers through his thick, sandy hair while watching Survivor. These broke my heart more than the times of struggle. Reminiscing about these peaceful moments only reminded me of the current state my life was in, but one memory pulled the trigger, one evening, one gut-wrenching evening. Consumed me wholly every time it invaded my thoughts. The evening where we sat on my velvet blue sofa, chatting about how we would spend the night. He contributed little to the talk of plans. The soft light of the sun's setting glow made the room airy, almost dreamlike. Looking back. White wainscoting wrapped around the perimeter of the room, just below the pale yellow walls, a color Dominic insisted on, and still remains in a now olive green room. Alarm bells went off in my head. Something was wrong. This I was sure of. So I pressed the matter. Before a word could be spoken, his face gave it away. His expression is forever ingrained in my mind. I don't know how to say this. I don't think this relationship is what I want anymore. My heart disintegrated. If it wasn't pounding in my chest, ringing in my ears, I would have thought the fucking thing gave out, but that's all in the past. Just as the version of me before that evening is, people would call me the life of the party. Once upon a time. I was always equipped with an enticing story, a clever joke, or an ear willing to listen. These were things I never saw in myself, despite those around me telling me otherwise. I only saw them once they vanished. My energy was drawn from the people around me. I'd make every effort to go out whenever I was able to, hanging out with friends at the local watering hole, or maybe grabbing a cup of coffee. Of course, Dominic was by my side in a majority of those excursions. Our inseparability was apparent to everyone who encountered us. In some way, I felt that my inability to be alone created an unhealthy dynamic. My identity had been placed within his, and his within mine. I no longer knew what I needed. Did I need to try and go out with Mariana, surrounding myself with people? Or did I stay like I had each night of that month, succumbing to my unmade bed the second I returned from work? Any conversation I've had since that evening has left me feeling like a broken record. Without a second thought, his name escapes my mouth. It's as though I have to talk about it until it makes sense, but it doesn't. Shutting out the world was easier than boring people with memories of my partner. Ex-partner. Never in my life had I spent such a prolonged period of time in a state of isolation such as this. The idea of enjoying alone time had always baffled me each time I entertained it. But what slowly crept up on me was that, every so often, alone time was pretty okay. When you recharge through other people, sacrifices are always made. You won't get to go exactly where you want, as you have to take into account the desires and opinions of your friends. Or with Dominic, I realized that I was so concerned with his wants, I'd often suppressed my own. Rarely was there a sacrifice on his end, partially due to my submissive nature, but partially due to his selfishness. The F.
The end. It's not unusual for stories to start at the end, you know. It's fairly common, in fact, for detective novels to begin after a crime has been committed. Yes, I know it's not the real end of the story, because that comes when the crime is solved, right? Still, the discovery of the crime aka murder does trigger the image of a life that is over. The whole novel then consists of the tracking down of the elements leading to the tragic event. Going backward in time. How did that horrible event come to pass? I have to say, starting at the end brings to mind a pair of Latin American writers. One, the Cuban Alejo Carpentier, created a protagonist who goes back to his roots, one who carries past selves, along inside his present life. Very complex and adorned with Baroque motifs, far beyond my humble capacity to write. Carpentier did a lot of time travel, traveling back both in time and in geography, like up the Orinoco River in the Lost Steppes, Los Pasos Perdidos, in his writing. There's no way I'd try to compete with him. He was Cuban, Russian, and French, and really well educated. No, there would be no comparison. Plus, I think he was also a musicologist and I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. The other writer, the Colombian Gabriel Garcia Marquez, wrote a slender novel about two brothers who killed their sister's bridegroom. The narrator explains why and how they did it, forcing readers to try to disbelieve the death that was announced in the first sentence. A brilliant little book, and a story nobody should try to copy. It would be so flat by comparison. I am honest enough not to think I'm a Garcia Marquez. I mean, telling you the whole plot on the first page, and then telling why it all happened? Writing that took guts. This is not going to be easy. Maybe it's more about what we decide to do with that end, if we decide to make it the first step in our story. It's a point of departure and we have to decide if we're going to depart toward the past or into the future. Do we want to understand what led up to the end or do we want to use that end to drive the nails in the coffin of what happened previously? Do we need to know why and remember? Or do we need to make something new in place of the old and forget? I am clearly on the fence about this. I have an ending to start off my story, a perfect little ending, or maybe it's a big one, and because this is my story, I can go either way, back or forward. Still, I'm stuck in the middle with me. Let's experiment, I tell myself, let's just explore. After all, it only takes a second to delete something that turns out to be junk. Ending option number 1, my mother has just died. It feels like Dante has come for me. I cannot tolerate this orphaned feeling, this uprooted, dislocated, maelstrom that asphyxiates me. Ardent, still, great arc, the world tells me I don't know who I am anymore. I was part of her and she lived inside my skin, even when we disagreed or fell silent. Looking at her was like looking in the mirror, but she never told me that and my spectrum kept me from knowing it. I know that because my mother has gone there is a pendulum swinging back and forth over my fragile neck and that the only escape from my own personal pit, not Poe's. He had his own, is to explore. I will finger-dip my way out of here, looking for the beautiful, black, painful silences of my mother. Her body is leaving, but she willed her shadowy, jagged or cottony word absences to me. That is why my cells speak mother tongue when my mother chose to be silent. Now, more than ever, fearfully brave, and stronger than her face offered you, I say softly, strumming no instrument but the heart. Sweet stone, my mother. Hard as a rock that woman, fortunately. Never judge a book or a woman by the cover. Pure steel, what made her that way? Do not expect me to answer. I feel unprepared to carve up her quarry of urinotaloeticnos. What I do know about her should be enough. She had a stiff Methodist upbringing, which is something you never recover from and is what you need to know about her first. You know how I know that, right? Methodism keeps people in line more than non-Methodists realize. There's obviously some secret, fidgety mechanism that gives an eerie power over the human brain. Almost like a cult, but don't tell anybody I said that. Protestants can get furious just hearing the word. They don't swear, either. Or drink, so I have heard. That means murkiness is part of this religion, meaning that anything not conforming to puritanical codes of behavior is the work of the devil. Well, maybe not the devil, but if you do certain bad things, you become evil for life. You are one of the non-redeemable. I believe I've tried to address this elsewhere, but it truly still is a well-kept secret. Methodism heaps shame, not the wrath of God, on the faithful, and that miserable little worm conquers you just like in somebody's poem. You probably know what poem I'm on.